I'm happy to see all of you guys, and please stick to the end, because if we split up, you might imagine what happens in all those movies. Because we are in the mission room right now, and mission room means we have a mission. The mission is called survival. And no worries, I will not invite any serial killers in here, but there are still attackers we need to take care of. Even in front end, even if everyone is thinking, or many people are thinking security, the back-end guys will handle that. I wouldn't completely agree. So let's take a look how to survive the horror movie situations of web security. A small disclaimer, or basically two disclaimers today. The first one, to use allegories and metaphors from horror movie and apply them to real-world scenarios of web security, I might need to touch upon horror movie plot or content points. So there's a slight spoiler alert, even though I will try to keep it as few or low as possible, but still I need to talk about content to use this content. And the other one is a small content warning itself. Because horror movies are not always like sugar and rainbow. They are sometimes dark, they have sometimes a little brutal or even explicit words. I will try to do my best to use non-explicit words, but still, it's horror movies. Horror movies might not be kind to you guys. So please bear with me, I'm doing my best, but still small content alert for offensive language, all the things you could imagine in horror movies. So, I would like to ask you a question. Did you see this dialogue line, or does it sound familiar to you? Like, I'll be right back. Just missing out for a few minutes. Who knows that situation? I see some hands. Who's annoyed if someone says something like this in a horror movie? Because it's always a great idea to go alone, be right back. Well, I see you smiling, so I guess we are at the same page here. There's a reason, because, right, this Scooby-Doo point got meme-ish, because let's split up is always the best idea. So again, stick to the end, otherwise we will not survive as a group. Because like, if we are not a team, not strength in numbers, it was always a good idea in horror movies, because if you split up, you'll be picked up one by one. And there's lots of other dumb decisions in horror movies, like having this killer tape, watching it despite all the warnings, and even leaving it open inside of the living room so the sun can see it, because what could happen? All the time, like not securing your calls. And then an intruder breaks into the chat, utilize sensitive data and your hardware to haunt you, like an unfriended. And yeah, I guess every one of us who is into horror movies felt annoyed by that one. And in that case, we don't need to go to YouTube or all these how-to-beat videos to be that person with the popcorn from a couch and saying, I'll do it better. But are we? Are we really better than them? If I take a look at media, hacker news, social media, or even newspapers, I can find lots of headlines, which sounds like movie titles, right? They sound super dangerous, like Heartbleed, Solar Wines, Eternal Blue, almost like Perfect Blue. But these are not movies. These are actual security leaks, security issues which blew up. My favorite example is basically the Heartbleed one, which was a vulnerability in the popular OpenSSL in 2024. And I guess every one of us uses SSL, right? So even if we have the best intent, if there's some problem in the supply chain, it might be for nothing. So yes, the horror movies are already upon us in web security, and especially nowadays with all that happens inside of the world, it gets more important than ever. But of course, there is a parallel in between web security or security issues and horror movies, but it's not completely the same picture. But still, it serves us, at least the horror movie situation serves us for wonderful allegories on risks, on things we need to take care about, help us learn about them, and help us get more secure. So yes, let's build our own survival playbook, like the people did in like Zombieland with all the rules, how to survive a zombie apocalypse, or Scream, which is the most classical example on how to survive a horror movie. And the first thing is, don't want to be the person ignoring warning signs. We all know what happens if we do that. So no matter if it's in a horror movie where people seemingly never switch the light on if they check out a certain situation, or security in the real world. May it be the clear warnings in movies, may it be CVEs, which are the entries of people finding security issues and reporting them, changelogs, media, and who is the one warning us? And who is the one helping us to build this playbook? In a movie, it's often like a clever professor, the kind nerd, or a team which helps us, even if it's just a library with resources and books, to give us this big lore dump to explain a horror movie, explain survival tactics. In the real world, we do have those things as well. May it be a talk at a conference, doesn't need to be mine, talking to other peers, or even whole groups of volunteers helping us to be aware what's up there, how attackers might approach us, and how to defend them. And I want to zoom in on a certain group which is made out of volunteers. It's the OWASP one. OWASP is a shorthand of Open Worldwide Application Security Project. And their goal is obviously to raise the security inside of the web. And they do it by doing lots of things. They go to conferences, they have their meetings and events, they have a wonderful, sophisticated online shop which is broken on purpose, so we can be the hackers themselves. But the most famous thing they always publish is a ranking, the ranking of the top 10 most important security risks. And right now, for the general one, the most recent one is the 2021 one, so it's a little older. However, they do have one for LLM and machine learning risks published this year. And for this year, they are basically, as far as I know, normalizing the data they collected. So a new one is on the way, but I'm referring to the 2021 version right now. And there, let's take a look at the horror movies we can find in this ranking. I want to start with a classical one. I don't know if many people of you like to see movies from the 30s, so 1933 was released, but there's a remake from 2020, which maybe you guys saw. It's the film called Invisible Man. And the plot is basically a man or a scientist called Griffin, who comes out to be invisible because somehow scientists in movies love to go for failed experiments and then things happen, basically. So he became invisible. And at first, he doesn't like that because it's obviously pretty bad. If nobody can see you, you cannot interact with people anymore. However, he will soon find out that it has these perks, like doing stuff nobody noticed. So he starts doing pranks, but he will slowly but steadily move into more criminal ways of using his powers, ending up in murder. So what could this be perfect as an allegory for? It's the first rank, and thus the most dangerous or biggest risk in web security right now. It's called broken access control. With access control, I mean that a user cannot act outside of their intended permissions. So they cannot see stuff they shouldn't see, cannot read information which is prohibited, and they are not able to do things, use features which you don't give them like the permission to do. And the broken access control is the opposite, that they can act outside of their permissions and do things with power they shouldn't have to begin with. And this could lead to unauthorized information disclosure, modification, or even destruction of information data, or like coerce, token manipulation, all those kind of things. And actually, it's first rank in this listing because it has the most occurrences of all risks, according to OWASP. So yes, it's definitely something we need to take a closer look. Let me dive a little deeper on the movie parallels in between The Invisible Man and broken access control. The invisibility in this movie is an obvious parallel for unauthorized access. If you're invisible, you can do whatever you please, nobody will notice, right? So the attackers in the real world can act unseen because they do figure out a way to get these powers, right? And they will use it, so it is an abuse of power, such as Griffin's invisibility inside of the movie. And this is a representation of privilege escalation, having powers beyond what should be allowed. Another parallel, which is even more creepy, is the false sense of security. If you cannot see an attacker, you feel safe, you feel secure, you don't notice that there's something off until there's a data leak, right? So yes, this is a parallel because guard or locks or any limitations cannot stop what they cannot see. And this leads us to another problem in real world, just like inside of the movie. It's the traceless crime. If the attacker operates unseen, no locks can catch it, and you cannot find any traces after this attack. Obviously, if you find your data leaked outside, then this is the obvious trace, but your system itself will not track it. All right, so this sounds pretty scary, right? How do we survive this, or how do we prevent such an attack to happen from the get-go? Let's take a look. The first one, which should be a stable for anything, especially when it comes to data and AI later on as well, if you have your agents working on data, deny by default. So it's basically the principle of least privilege. You should deny anything, no matter if it's reading, updating, deleting, whatever, unless it's a public resource. If your information is public, it won't hurt. So in this regard, try to be as strict as possible and then assign these privileges to your user if they need it. Next one will be a rate limit. So this rate limit is especially useful when it comes to brute force attack. So if an attacker tries to force himself into your system by just trying out lots of combinations, you can stop in a little bit or at least minimize the harm because at some point your system just said like, no, you cannot get in. Next one. When it comes to using tokens, tokens are pretty cool, but you should always invalidate them after some time. So have them short-lived, don't keep them as longer as you want, because this is an angle an attacker likes to use, like stealing the tokens from your session and then wreaking havoc with it. So trying to invalidate them, and if you need to keep them for a certain time because of your user experience, you don't want them to log in like all the time, think about, for example, the OAuth standard. So you have a way to keep them valid, but invalidate them if they need to. And last but not least, think about an access control mechanism. So you can go for tools, but there are open source ones as well. I will show you one of the CMCF Foundation later on. So yes, an access control mechanism, if you build it your own, ACL can sometimes be a little drag. So yeah, check those out. There are open source alternatives as well. And mind the AI. I already touched upon that some minutes ago. Data exposure is prevalent in this. And if I'm not mistaken, it's the second rank right now in the LLM OWASP top 10. First one being prompt engineering, which leads to data exposure. So it's a super important point to see, okay, you have your agents in place. They can access information. They can be social engineered to expose this information as well. So be always mindful when it comes to working with information on your agents. And yes, there's a wonderful talk by my friend Liren. I obviously failed to add the QR code, but I can show it later on as well. And a small recommendation for an access control mechanism, no matter if it's for humans or for AI agents, is OpenFGA. This is an open source tool inspired by Google Zanzibar, role-based access control, so based on roles basically. But you can always go for attribute-based if you need to. And it is open source, and I trust these guys because it's the Cloud Native Computing Foundation taking care of it, which is a pretty good sign of trust for me. Okay, so far so good for the broken access control. Let's get to the next metaphor, the next horror movie. And this one is Hellraiser. It's a movie from the 80s. I guess it's 1987 when it was released. And I guess some of you guys saw this friendly person here. It is called Pinhead. And it is not the parallel I want to use, but more what calls him in action. It's a small puzzle called lemon configuration. And when solved, it opens a gateway to the hell-like realm of the xenobite life forms. He's one of those xenobites. And if you solve this puzzle and open the gateway, they will come to haunt you and use you for experiments. Obviously, I have lots of movies in it with experiments, but never mind. So the plot point here is a woman who tries to resurrect or get back her lover who did solve this puzzle, the lemon configuration. And yeah, the lemon configuration itself is a wonderful allegory for cryptographic failures and curses which happen when a cryptography or basically a encryption is being broken. I'm talking about the cryptographic failures point, which is the second rank in the OWASP ranking, and it was previously known as sensitive data exposure, but as this is more a symptom, which could happen for broken access control as well, they are calling it cryptographic failures right now. And as the word already implies, it hints to failures related to cryptography or the lack thereof. The memory parallels is a puzzle block itself, which is our encryption system. And even if it's a little far-fetched, the xenobites are the consequences of the cryptographic failure. So if you break the encryption, you will be haunted by attackers or by xenobites. The different dimensions which will be cracked open when the encryption is breached are the security context, and the resurrection of the woman's boyfriend called Frank is the failed data recovery. How can we survive this or even prevent cryptographic failures in the first place? Well, sounds easy, but you really should think about encrypt all sensitive data at rest. For that one, you should classify all the data so you know what is sensitive, what not, which is super critical to be if it being leaked or not, and see through the classification where the leak might have occurred. Next one is don't store unnecessarily. So if you have information, data, even code, discard it as soon as possible if you don't need it anymore, because otherwise it might be a vector of attack. And use PCI DCC compliant tokenization authentication if you really need to have it in place and save it. If you go for protocols, go for an up-to-date one and try to avoid stuff like SMTP or SMTP because they can be cracked open pretty easily. And last but not least, I already talked about saving unnecessarily. Please be really careful with the cache, because everything what's in the session can be misused or being basically stolen by attackers. So please be mindful on that one. And now I'm a little bit excited because we're getting to the next movie, which was basically the start of this talk, so why this talk exists. I'm talking about Alien. The first installment of the movie was published in 1979. And for me, it is a perfect metaphor for a gap, a risk we all, especially we front-end people, need to care about. But I am already too fast. Let's touch upon the plot. It's basically revolving around the spaceship crew, which was sent to basically explore. However, they were called and led by an emergency call to a broken spaceship, so to say. And they were a little too curious and brought something back with them into their own spaceship, and then basically got hunted by a deadly extraterrestrial creature. And the main culprit for bringing a souvenir back to the ship without knowing is this cute fella. It's one of the main characters, and it was found in the spaceship, basically hatched from an egg, and people thought it would be cute or interesting or whatever. But, well, it seems cute. It just wants to hug people, but I guess I don't want to be hugged by this fella because, well, I'm not up for a special souvenir. Because, yes, this plot point, when it comes to this face hugger, implementing a souvenir into a human, which hatches at some point and then brings this alien into the spaceship. It's a wonderful allegory on injection. And yeah, it's pretty difficult to use non-explicit language here because the film is pretty explicit when it comes to this process. But let me try it. So the facehugger makes people to hosts, which is in real world, in injection terms, an initial attack vector. So it will bypass the input validation or the quarantine area of the spaceship, and thus serves as the initial system penetration because we got some part of an alien egg into the spaceship. The implementation afterwards is that the facehugger, which attached itself to the human, basically did a payload injection. We will call it in real world, because it was a code or egg injection inside of a human, and the egg was basically saved or basically put into the human, which is a malicious data or a malicious egg storage. We get further with a chest burster, which is basically the birth of the xenomorph. And in real-world terms, in injection terms, this is the code execution. So the attacker's code, which he injected through your input field into your system, is being compiled and executed as if it was your own code. And last but not least, the system compromise is the full-grown alien, which wreaks havoc inside of your application, or in the movie, it wreaks havoc inside the spaceship. So yes, I think this is a perfect allegory to explain injection. And yeah, this is something especially we as front-end developers need to fight. And how to do that. So yeah, this is basically the thought process in between this. I was a little slow to press proceed, but you can see facehugger injects egg to the human, becomes xenomorph. So how to fight it? Well, first and foremost, only use trusted sources, go for safe API, and avoid interpreter in between. For example, by going for a parameterized interface if you have a user input or for your URLs. And maybe consider using ORMs. If you go for server-side input validation, that's a wonderful safety net, but it shouldn't be your own thing, like not only rely on the server. You could instead think about SQL features, like limit or other controls, so you avoid mass data exposure. And what's basically the most important part? Escaping. Escape basic special characters, escape possible script injections if someone, for example, goes to your input fields and types script into it. Try to escape anything you can. So it could be SQL structures such as table names, column spaces, like anything at any point where you have user-supplied data, which gets into your system. I like to picture that as my simplified example, which is basically a quarantine system class to match the alien allegory. So we will have a scanner there to detect the chest burster, and if it's detected, it should throw an error, or quarantine system should throw an error and stop. So the chest burster or the attacker's code cannot enter our spaceship. Afterwards, there's still sanitation in place, so we want to do escaping as well, which I would like to call the process of cleaning. And you can write it yourself if you want to, but be careful if you do. Or go for tools like libraries or build your own. There's DOM purifier, sanitize HTML, lots of small things. If you use Angular, React, or Vue, they might have even inbuilt features to help you escaping. I'm a Vue developer, so I know it in Vue well. It is the browser-native APIs, but I think React and Angular are not that different. If you want to write it on your own, you could go for regex. So these are some examples. I don't want to go too much into detail because of the time we have. However, if you want to go for regex, be a little careful. So these are the ones I did on my own. I know that people like to generate them by LLMs. But please be really careful when it comes to that, because if you go for an LLM-generated regex like this one, it's a wonderful example where I like to quote my friend Liran. They could introduce a redos gap, a redos attack, or people could use it for a redos attack, because if it's not being basically interpreted, it will jump back to the last expression, and then going on DDoS, denial of service, because your CPU will not be able to handle that. So be super careful if you go to LLMs when it comes to user-generated code. Next one, next movie. It's for the Blob. The allegory, or the movie plot, is basically an alien called the Blob, which is, I cannot describe it better than just a big blob, I don't know. And it crashes on Earth and envelopes living beings or objects and eating them, devouring them, and growing. And as its texture is basically like a blob, you cannot fight it with like normal weapons or guns or something. And the more red it grows and the more bigger it is, the more aggressive it gets. And I think this is a wonderful allegory on technical debt, and especially on vulnerable and outdated dependencies. So yes, it's rank 6. I jumped ranks a little bit. I have 2 more movies if we got time later on. But I think this is really important for us using NPM every so often. So I was like, okay, I need to talk earlier about that. So yes, this is the only category of the OWASP ranking which doesn't have any common vulnerability and exposure CVE entries onto it. But it's super important to think about that, especially considering Heartbleed and the other like supply chain problems we talked about. The movie parallel is the blob's growth. The growth is basically the dependency sprawl. And the consumption of the victims or the objects is the vulnerability spread. So if you have a dependency being outdated, it might be the same in other dependencies as well, and the longer you wait for fixing them, the worse it gets and the more difficult it is to fix it. Which is another movie parallel. The growth can be unstoppable if you have unmanaged dependencies. So how do we survive this situation? How do you survive the blob? So similar to before, remove anything you don't need. May it be unnecessary features, components, files, documentation, comments. All unused codes should be gone because it might introduce dependencies. It might need some tools in place you might not have in mind, especially if it's unused. So get rid of them altogether. Think about an inventory of your version numbers so you know that there's an outdated dependency, maybe an outdated package you need to take care of. So there's tools you could use, like the OWASP dependency check, retire.js. You don't need to do it on your own. But if you want to do it on your own, it might be a good idea to have Hacker News in mind, or the CVEs or other databases which track security issues. If you take a look at the packages you download by npm or yarn or pnpm, go for signed packages and trusted sources. And yes, this is not a one-fits-all thing. You can still get into problems, especially like I remember a few weeks ago, there has been an npm problem of a contributor being in phishing. So there were vulnerabilities inside of his packages because he was breached. So it could still be a problem if you think it's a well-established package to use. So still keep your eye on news or social media to find out quickly. Then monitor if a library gets unused, so especially in open source, if the maintainer cannot take care of it anymore. He cannot work on security issues or update their own dependencies anymore. So in this case, search for an alternative or get rid of the package, even if it's a little painful. And last but not least, Depender.bot is there for a reason. Please always think about updating, even if it feels a little troublesome. It will only grow more a burden if you wait. So really try to update as fast as possible, obviously with news in mind. So if there's a breach contributor, you learn about it before updating. And especially considering supply chain attacks, if there's some problem inside of your supply chain, and especially thinking about the training data an LLM is using. Please be really careful when it comes to the code it suggests to you, especially in vibe coding, because it might be outdated, it might have a training set being outdated. Please double check that it's really up to date, it's correct, and it doesn't introduce more security issues. In another talk, I actually have some statistics, so I don't have it in my mind right now, but I know that people trust the AI-generated code more than their own. But the actual trend and statistics on CVEs, especially in this year, tells another story. So please be careful, please read it as if it was a junior. So please be careful on that one. All right, the new overspanking for the general risk. I already touched upon that a little bit. They are nominalizing the data right now, as far as I know. Hopefully, they will publish the general listing soon. But there's one specific one on LLM risks and machine learning in place, so please check it out if you're interested. So, for now, let me add some more general rules on how to survive a horror movie and how to survive security issues, really generally aside from coding. Stay as a team. Don't fall for the meme of splitting up. And the fact that you're here listening to me right now, visiting a conference and talking to people already show me that you are living this advice, so I'm proud of you. Take care of your batteries. In a horror movie situation, you don't want to be the person with a torch without any batteries or an empty phone battery, right? So for web development, this means nurture your tools and the software in use. Keep it up to date, write your tests, keep it well maintained, and easy enough for you to understand it in like 6 months from now. Use login, or in horror movie words, test if your attacker was really defeated and not introducing you to a jump scare. For tools, test your code, do login, try to get as much information on your application as possible. And last but not least, take the warning seriously. Don't be the person knowing it all better than professionals or the community. So try to listen to best practices, develop them further, but the best practices and rules are there for a reason. So for now, this is my general set. I split it up a little bit to give enough space for questions, but if you're interested in more allegories, I do have 2 more with me. So yes, let's see. Are there any questions right now? If not, let me quickly check how late it is. We've still got like 7, 8-ish minutes left, so let's see for the encore. I would like to ask you guys, is there a horror movie you have maybe inside of your mind being a great allegory? Let's see. For example, I was super surprised. I didn't thought about Death Note for broken access control, because a Death Note, being able like this book to kill people, is an obvious power you shouldn't have. But this is not the anime version right now. We are going for Haunted House on Haunted Hill. We're still at the classics. So this is basically a movie from, I guess, 1959, and the remake was almost like 2000, I guess 1999, where a millionaire called Lauren has invited 5 people to the house for a haunted house party. And whoever stays in this house for one night gets a big amount of money, I guess $10,000 or something. And as the night progresses, the guests are trapped within the house with an assortment of terror. I like this allegory for insecure design, because risks related to design and architectural flaws are like such a house with lots of traps in it. A call for more use of threat modeling, secure design patterns, and referent architectures might be in it. And I did think I want to differentiate between design flaws and implementation defects. So injection is something different, broken access control is something different. If you have a weird decision when it comes to, threat modeling, it might be a different problem. All right, so, and basically when it comes to the horror movie itself, it's more about like no escape rules, safety mechanisms, problems you cannot be patched out because your architecture is already flawed, and how to survive that. Have a secure development lifecycle in place, so do get reviews, to get feedback by AppSec professionals. Think about component libraries instead of reinventing the wheel, like establish and use a library of secure design patterns or paved roads, basically, escape roads, so to say. The threat modeling point is a critical authentication, access control, business logic. You should see if there's maybe a problem. Like, is there a form which might invite injection, style injection as well? Like, can there be a click-checking attack because someone can fake UI elements, stuff like that. So just look ahead and write tests. Always write tests so you know what happens, or use some tools like Snyk. All right, let's quickly check. We are at 5 minutes. Are you up for another one? All right, so let's go for the last one. I'm happy to say I still got some time. It's the Night of the Living Dead. What do you think it could be a metaphor for, like zombie apocalypse stuff? Okay, let me get into the plot real quick. It's a movie from... probably a little... Sorry? It gets close to that, yes. So I was thinking about security misconfiguration, which can be secure, like technical debt because you don't care about it. Well, just to get you all on the same level, it's basically 7 people trapped in a farmhouse in rural Pennsylvania, and they're under assault by flesh-eating corpses. We could call them zombies right now, but I guess in 1968, zombie apocalypse, I don't know if it was that much of a thing. And even though, I guess in the movie they are called ghouls, right? So yes, it's basically that. And it perfectly represents security misconfiguration because of the ghoul defense. In the movie, you need to have multiple entry points, which we need to secure. May it be certain doors, certain windows, stuff like that. The defensive measures against the ghouls must be properly implemented inside of the movie. Resource management is critical, especially if you fortify your home, you cannot get out to get more food in, basically. And one weak point compromises everything. And it mirrors the security misconfiguration in a quite self-explanatory way, because if you have missing appropriate security hardening or unnecessary features which are enabled, installed, but not used that much, you still have the default accounts and their password in place, like admin for your router, for example. Seemingly there are still people doing that. Or an error handling revealed stack traces or other, like, overshares information. This is a wonderful accessibility topic as well, where you think about how much information to propose to the people so they can solve an error in your application, but not oversharing to make it easier for attackers to get in. And how can we hopefully don't have security misconfiguration in place, yet have a hardening process in place, so it makes it fast and easy to deploy another environment that is appropriately locked down, maybe having more than just one production system. Staging is great for that. You should think as minimal as possible, so you really have, and without having any unnecessary features, components, documentation, samples. Same like the dependency thing. You should have tasks or workflows in place to review and update the configuration if you need to. And think about separation of concerns. So that might be a separated application architecture, so if some attacker gets access to one part of your system, he cannot access everything. Classification, for example, is great as well, like classifying the areas of sensitiveness. All right, so I guess we still got 2 minutes left, but this is basically all the analogies in this horror cabinet I have right now. If you're interested, I'm rewriting this one for anime, so if you want to see the anime analogies in a unfinished slide deck, just let me know somewhere here. But apart from that, my name is Ramona. I'm a developer advocate at Auth0. If you want to check out our UI component library, and yeah, otherwise, meet me somewhere here. I am mingling around the conference, and I'd be happy to hear your thoughts, your experiences, and if you come up with another analogy as well. Thank you so much.